All right, to discuss more, we're being joined by Colonel David B. Desroches, live from Washington, D.C. He is a professor at the Thayer Marshall Institute and former Deputy Director for Peacekeeping in the Office of the Secretary of Defense. Always a pleasure having you on the broadcast, Colonel. Of course, let's begin with the latest. U.S., of course, firing and seizing an Iranian-flagged cargo ship. Then also President Donald Trump saying that their talks will be taking place. He will be sending the U.S. officials, Iran rejecting any talks and vowing to respond. Do you think that this action by U.S. right now, will that derail the talks?
Well, I mean, the U.S. blockade is a reciprocal blockade to the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. And, a day ago, 2 Indian oil tankers were fired on by the Revolutionary Guard while trying to transit the Strait of Hormuz. So I think Trump views this as a reciprocal action. Basically, if neutral civilian shipping, in this case Indian shipping, is fired upon, then the U.S. blockade of Iranian cargo and Iranian ships going in and out of Iranian ports seems to be a measured response to that. I think that it will derail the talks, at least for a bit, and I expect that in order to get the talks to resume, there probably will be some concentrated military action against Iran. I would imagine it would be against the base that those boats that attacked the Indian tankers sailed from.
Colonel, if these talks don't take place, as that seems to be plausible at this point, given the kind of hostilities almost resuming, they have resumed in the Strait of Hormuz. It's being considered a violation by the Iranian side, while they've already blockaded the Strait of Hormuz since actually March. And I wanted to understand from you, at this point, if these talks don't take place, is it a certainty that the war will resume in a far more gross manner?
I don't know if it will resume in an expanded section. I think, though, that that's probable. I think that what the United States will probably do is, it depends. They have one of 2 ways to go. Well, the first is the one that I just sketched out, where there's a measured, proportionate response where it's directed against Iran's naval assets, locate the base that the Revolutionary Guard boats that attacked the Indian tankers took off from, destroy that base, their higher headquarters, and work your way as far up the chain as you can to the naval headquarters in Tehran, if possible. The second possibility is to say, we really have to let the Iranians know that if they don't negotiate, they're going to get something really bad. That usually involves expanding the target set. Normally, the American way of war, when we only conduct a war by air power, is we bomb for a while. And then when we see that air power alone doesn't achieve all of our objectives, the target set to be bombed expands. So if you look at the Kosovo campaign in 1999, initially that was limited just against the Serbian police, which were carrying out a genocide against the Kosovars. But it expanded over 66 days to the point where every bridge and every power plant, every bridge over in Belgrade and every power plant in Serbia was destroyed or damaged.
And it's interesting because Trump has already said that if at all they don't come on the table and if this deal is not done, the U.S. will be attacking the bridges and the power plants. And there's been an attempt. So earlier we saw a comment coming from the Iranian delegation which said that we were an inch closer to the deal. That is when Vance left, say that we didn't agree to it. Sad news. And now we see the U.S. also saying that they want to go for the talks, Iran rejecting it. So how do you analyze this rhetoric change, and do you think that an escalation is probably the only possibility considering the fact that the ceasefire ends on Wednesday?
Yeah, good question. So one of the big debates since the Iranian Revolution in Washington has been who actually controls Iran. And the diplomats who come to talk to the Americans and to other countries on Iran's behalf, are they really empowered? Can they make a decision? If they make an agreement, can they stick to it? Or are they just there to distract us? And the real power lays with the Revolutionary Guard and the people who speak for the supreme leader or in the name of the supreme leader, who we have to emphasize for your viewers, there's absolutely no proof the supreme leader is alive. There's as much proof that I have an alien here in my house that as there is that the supreme leader is actually alive. So what we saw was the foreign minister left Islamabad ostensibly with some conditions agreed to, and was denounced by the official Iranian news agency just as a matter of mechanics of negotiations. That's not an organization you can negotiate with because it keeps shifting. So it's quite possible that the Iranians, there's an internal struggle over what their real line is and who really holds power. And at some point, the person who does hold power, will come to negotiate. But I think that it may take some more pressure on the Iranians, and that pressure will most likely take the form of a renewed bombing campaign and possibly an expanded bombing campaign.
Let me take that a little further, Colonel David. With the U.S. still scheduled to send their vice president to Pakistan for these talks, Iran saying we're not interested, do you feel Iran will eventually come around and send a delegation regardless of what those statements are seeming like as of now, given the fact that, okay, Iran did not capitulate, but they've taken a bad amount of beating. And as you explained, U.S. military policy, if the initial airstrikes do not end it, it's only going to expand further. That's something I'm sure the Iranians also understand. Do you feel they will come around and these talks will happen as scheduled?
Oh, absolutely. Look, I've spent months talking to different representatives of the Iranian regime on various media forums, and they were saying, no, we will never sit down and negotiate with the Americans. They're duplicitous, they're evil. That is an absolute red line. They blew through that red line. And they will blow through other red lines. They signed a deal with Saddam Hussein. So, Khomeini himself. So, yeah, they will eventually do it, but they won't do it if they're not pressured. I do think my advice would be to not send J.D. Vance to any negotiations until you're assured of success, unless you want to politically cripple him. I think that the point in sending J.D. Vance initially was that the Iranians had put out in the Western media, which is very receptive to this, a message that the two U.S. negotiators, Jared Kushner and Stephen Witkoff, neither of whom have a background in diplomacy, that they were incompetent, and that they were holding out hope that the administration was fragmented and Vance was an isolationist. So I think it made sense to send Vance once.
I hear your point. I hear your point, Colonel, but just wanted to ask you, what if you can substantiate why you feel Iran can get pressured into talks or a deal? It has not happened in years. It has not happened last year. And even now, Iran has not capitulated. They are recouping in the last 2 weeks. Enough reports are suggesting that. Even an NYT report suggests that 60% of their missile launchers are intact. 40% of their attack drone arsenal is intact. Do you feel they can get pressured?
Yeah, I think they can. I mean, they retain some offensive capability. I'm not so sure how the New York Times comes about those numbers, but I know the Iranians have put out the message. They said, "Oh, we have more missiles than ever before. We have stronger missiles, better missiles." And when it became apparent that they were unable to effectively target U.S. and Israeli military assets, they said, "Oh, we're just waiting our time. We have the real good stuff." Which I find that just strange credulity that they would take so much punishment. I come to that conclusion because Iran does respond to pressure. As I mentioned earlier, they said that they would never deal with Saddam Hussein. Ayatollah Khomeini eventually did, saying that it was like drinking poison, but he settled. They said they wouldn't meet with the Americans in this current thing, but they did. They've said for 40 years that Lebanese Hezbollah has nothing to do with Iran, but when we got to negotiations, they said, no, Lebanese Hezbollah and Iran are one or two spirits in the same body and have to be included in that, basically treating Lebanese Hezbollah as an agency of the Iranian government. So, when they are in a situation, they make a rational choice, which is, make a modification when they're facing something that's worse. Okay. And so the question is, what is worse than, how much pain do they have to suffer before they compromise on these key points?
And Colonel, it's interesting because the fact that there is a ceasefire in effect, but it will close, of course, it's going to end on Wednesday. And till now, if you look at the dates of the talks, well, of course, there's no date. It's just the White House has said in a couple of days, and a couple of days could be 2 days on Wednesday, or it could be beyond the ceasefire. Is it too close to the ceasefire? Does it seem like both sides are almost at a point where they're all testing each other, and it's just to see who blinks first, because Iran has clearly warned that it will respond to this U.S. forces and who fired upon and seized the Iranian flag. Do you think there is more possibility of a escalation in, of course, the attacks? And if that happens, where does it leave the talks? Do U.S. still want to send its envoy, or there would be back-channel talks? How do you analyze that?
Yeah, I got to say, I'm a little surprised that that I have to bring up the fact that 2 Indian tankers were fired upon by Iran. So supposedly there's a ceasefire, and you had 2 Indian ships that were complying with the things of the ceasefire, and they were attacked by the Revolutionary Guard. That was the first action there. So the ceasefire is clearly leaking. I think that the seizure of the Tuska is a measured reciprocal response to those Iranian violations, just as the blockade of Iran is a response to Iran's attacks. And it has to be emphasized again on neutral civilian shipping sailing in recognized international passageway that actually lays in Omani waters, not in Iranian waters. I mean, this is just remarkable. So there's clearly a violation of the ceasefire, and I think that what you get is there's this Iranian line that they seem to hold that, well, if we're engaged in talks, then the partner that we're talking with can't engage in military operations. That is a ahistorical line. I mean, the Korean War went on for 2.5 years while there were continuous negotiations going. So I think there will be fighting, and then there will be talks, and there will be fighting, and there will be talks.
I hear your point. I hear your point, Colonel, and definitely those 2 Indian tankers that were attacked, that's not lost. India has already raised a strong protest with the Iranian side. The Iranian ambassador was summoned. He was given a hearing at the foreign ministry, and of course that would have been taken back to the Iranian leadership as well. That was not well taken at all.